you so much.
3, 2,
And through grace we are saved.
1. So we're going to be in chapter 3 tonight, like I said. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and not waste any time. Let's just jump right in and let's read our passage tonight. It's going to be verses 1 through 12. It says, "Not many should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we will receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a mature man who is also able to control his whole body. Now, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we also guide the whole animal. And consider ships. Though very large and driven by fierce winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So too, though the tongue is a small part of the body, it boasts great things. Consider how large a forest a small fire ignites. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue, a world of unrighteousness, is placed among the parts of our bodies. It pollutes the whole body, sets the course of life on fire, and is set on fire by hell. Every sea creature, reptile, bird, or animal is tamed and has been tamed by man. But no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. We praise our Lord and Father with it, and we curse men who are made in God's likeness with it. Praising and cursing come out of the same mouth. My brothers, these things should not be this way. Does a spring pour out sweet and bitter water from the same opening? Can a fig tree produce olives, my brothers, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a saltwater spring yield fresh water." All right, so that's what we're going to be here tonight, talking about the power of words. So we don't think about that too much because I actually heard a statistic today that about on average, so not taking into account whether you are a super extrovert or introvert, but the average human will spend a fifth of their life talking. A fifth of their life. Do you know how much time we spend sleeping? Like the percentage of sleeping is like way higher than that 20% point. A fifth of your life is spent talking. So the things that we say are being said often. So we need to know what to say and how our words can affect people. So the first thing I think that James is really showing us here is that words have great potential. So James compares them, I guess first we'll talk about what is potential, right? So you hear it in when you're talking about energy. So there's like potential energy and kinetic energy. Think of it like a roller coaster, right? So when you're up at the top of the roller coaster and you've basically like come to a complete stop right before you go down that terrifying drop where you scream and your arms go up and you vomit out the side. When you're right at the very top, that's when you have the highest amount of potential energy, because you can go down forwards like you expected and go super fast down that way, or there could be malfunction. You could go down backwards and you could go that way. But the point is that you have so much potential, meaning if you move at all, you're going to get moving real quick, real fast, and you're not going to be able to stop it. So that's high potential. But the thing about potential energy is that it can be used in many ways. Potential energy is not focused on one kind of action. It's not attributed to an action yet. It's just potential. It's not become actual. And that's what words, before you say them, have. A lot of potential energy. So James here compares it to a fire. He says, how large a forest can be set afire by such a small flame. And so you think about fire, right? So fire has the potential to be used in such a constructive way, especially in the time that James is writing, because they didn't have electricity. So if you were going to keep yourself warm at night, it was going to be fire. If you're going to cook a meal, it was going to be fire. If you wanted to make a torch, you're going to need fire. If you wanted to make a weapon or a tool of some kind, you need a fire in your blacksmith. So fire had incredible creative potential. But simultaneously, fire also has some of the highest destructive potential, right? So if you have, so they used to have these things called braziers that they keep in their home, just a little hearth of fire that would burn pretty much around the clock so that they could, whenever they needed fire for one of those tools, they could use it. If that brazier got knocked over, then it would set their whole house on fire, their whole neighborhood, their whole town, kingdom even. Rome nearly burnt to the ground because of something just like that. So fire has this incredible destructive potential. And in fact, there's no, once the destruction is done by fire, it cannot be undone. Right? You've never seen a fire go back and unburn something, right? Once it's burnt, it's burnt. It's going to stay that way. So that's the beauty of fire, is that it has such a high potential to be both creative and productive and destructive and ruining. So we have to be so careful with how we utilize fire. If there's not someone tending the fire, then it has the ability to completely destroy and ruin something. And in a very similar way, our words work in that manner. So the words that you say have the potential to speak life into someone, to rescue someone from a depression that they're in or a really hard day, to just sit with them, be with them, speak with them, listen. That is so much potential for growth and development. But at the same time, one thoughtless word, one malicious, hateful word, has the ability to stick with someone forever and cut all the way down. You know how, like, when we were kids and stuff, like little kids, and you're on the playground and someone calls you a mean name and you're like, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And then you realize how stupid that was to say, because it couldn't be any less true. Because yeah, like, sticks and stones hurt. Okay, you ever had a rock thrown at your head? Okay, cool. But that heals after a little bit. Maybe if you're unlucky, it might even take a year to heal something back like that. But if you think about the words, hurtful words that someone has said to you, that stuff sticks for years and years. And it begins to form your identity in the way that you view yourself because of something that someone said. And I can guarantee something that you have said to someone thoughtlessly has impacted them in the same way. Because that's just human life and human nature. That's the way that it works. So while we have this high potential in our words to build up, we also have the same potential to destroy in an instant. So that's why we have to be so aware that words have such high charged power. In fact, some of the brightest moments in all of history were stirred and focused around some of the most powerful words in history. So you think about the civil rights movement, right? Like when African Americans were working to have equal rights, what speech comes immediately to mind? Martin Luther King's "I Had a Dream" speech. I can almost guarantee that you've heard at least part of it at some point in your life, because it changed the course of history. Civil War, you had the Gettysburg Address. The Revolutionary War, Declaration of Independence. I know it wasn't spoken, but it was written. Same concept. So the most powerful moments in American history especially, shaped by words. And yet, in some of the darkest times in our nation's history, in our world's history, have come at the foot of these powerful words. You think of Hitler's Nazi regime. Part of the reason that he was able to garner that much support in his nation, that much nationalism, and that much hatred towards the Jewish people that eventually led to the Holocaust was because of speeches that he gave to masses of people. He was a horrible man who did evil things, but he was definitely one of the most brilliant speakers of his time. So you can see how damaging words can become when used the wrong way. So remember that words have great potential, and so we have to know that there's that power and use them responsibly. And so then the next thing I want us to look at is that the words that we speak reveal what's already in our hearts. And so where do I see that in the text? So this is James starts talking about, he has all these images in this passage. He starts talking about horses with bits in their mouth. So you guys know, horses are, these big creatures. They're several hundred pounds. And yet you put this little piece of metal in their mouth, and all of a sudden you can turn them any which way you want to. And someone who weighs, like a 60-pound little girl can sit on the back of this 800-pound horse and make it do whatever the heck she wants. Same thing with, he talks about ships and their rudders. And I'm not just talking about a little fishing boat or something. I'm talking a big old pirate ship style. Yeah, big old Captain Jack Sparrow, Black Pearl type of ship. And that is steered by a relatively small rudder. It's like an oar that's stuck in the water. And someone just stands there and turns it. And the whole ship, its movement is dictated by how that rudder is turned. Yeah, and yes, and that's what controls the rudder, is the wheel. And so what I see there that's really interesting, why did James pick the bits of horses and the rudder of a ship? If you put a bit in a horse's mouth and just leave it there and you don't ever put someone on the back of the horse to, pull the reins or anything that's attached to that bit, it's not going to impact the horse. All it is a chewing toy for a horse at that point. It doesn't do its job. Same thing with a pirate ship. When you don't man the wheel that controls the rudder, your pirate ship's just going to go whichever way the wind blows. What it needs is someone to steer and guide it. So there is another force behind this guiding principle. So if you follow the imagery, follow the metaphor that James has for us, he's saying that the words that we speak dictate who we are as a person. So the bit dictates the horse. But what dictates our words? And so let's look and see what Jesus says. It's right up here in Matthew 12, 34 through 35. He says, speaking to the Pharisees, he says, "You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him." So what Jesus is saying is humans are kind of like sponges, okay? So, you pick up a sponge and you can look at it every which way and you might kind of be able to figure out what this sponge soaked up. But when you squeeze it, there's not going to be any doubt what was inside of that sponge. When you squeeze it, it's going to come out. So if you have, in the deepest parts of you, if you have bitterness or hatred or just general anger or jealousy or whatever, when life squeezes you, that's going to come out of you. No matter how good you looked on the outside, no matter how many times you went to church, no matter how many times you said yes and amen, no matter how many times your hands were up in the air during worship, all of the good things that you can say are a moot point when you look at what's actually inside of your heart. Jesus is saying what your heart is full of is what is going to come out of your mouth. And so we need to be very, very careful, because when life beats you down, you're going to have times when you are tired and hungry and frustrated and irritated and stressed and just at the end of your rope. And that's when you find out what's on the inside of you. If you don't already know, if you've been trying to fake it or whatever, when you are at your worst, that's what's going to come out. And so ultimately the goal is that when you are squeezed, what comes out is not hatred and jealousy. What comes out is Jesus Christ. What comes out is the goodness and forgiveness that Jesus has shown you, that it's changed in the very core of your being. So what is your heart full of? What kinds of things are you saying regularly? What are your words telling the people around you is in your heart? Are you complaining? Are you angry, bitter, spiteful, hateful? If you see these things in your speech, if you see these things in your heart, then that shows you that you have a real problem. But there's good news. Each of us have a real problem. If we didn't have a real problem, we wouldn't need a cross. We wouldn't have crosses on our wall in our youth room if we didn't need a reminder that Jesus died on the cross for us. And the only reason he had to die on the cross was because we needed to be saved. He wouldn't have come to save us if we didn't need saving. It's like a lifeguard at a pool who just jumps off the stand to go and save someone who's just, swimming. They're just doing their thing. They're just swimming. And he's like, tweet, 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 coming in. And then does the Baywatch, gets him out of the water. And then he's like, what? I was just swimming. He's like, oh, sorry, I thought you were drowning. Thought I'd come save you. I didn't need saving. Yeah, that's not us. Okay? Jesus didn't come down on a false alarm. Jesus came down because we were headed to hell. There's no other way around it. There was no amount of good works that we could do to overcome the bad that we had already done. James says, we read this a few weeks back when he talks about, if you have broken one part of the law, you are guilty of breaking all of the law. The one who has broken one is just as guilty as the one who's broken all. The punishment is the same. Paul says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us are in the same boat. We all have wicked, broken hearts on the inside. When we are when we are feeding our own desires and we're squeezed, what comes out is sin. Because we are sinners. And so what we need is to have a changed heart. We need something else new inside of us. But just like a house who has a rotten foundation, a crumbling cement foundation underneath it, the house is helpless to fix its own foundation. They need a builder or contractor or someone to come in to fix that foundation, to start the house over. Indeed, if you build your house, if you make your foundation on sinking sand, all that's going to happen is it's going to shift underneath you and it's going to crumble. You need to have Christ, the solid rock, as your foundation, which means you start over. But you are the house. You don't get to fix yourself. All you get to do is submit to Jesus. Say, God, I see how broken I am. I see how lost I am. I see how hopeless my life is without you. If I'm not committing myself to serving you, if I am not giving myself over to you to do whatever it takes to make me fixed, then I am only going to lead myself down a path of destruction. And that's what we're called to do as Christians. We're called to surrender to Jesus. James says that we cannot tame our tongues. He said, look, mankind is great at taming so many things. You ever seen SeaWorld? You ever seen what they can do with these animals? I mean, and it's not always the best way that they went about doing it in the first place. But like these killer whales can do some incredible things that like I can't even do. And so we have found ways to tame so much, even tame the elements. We already talked about taming fire. Even in the ancient times, they had already tamed the winds. They were using it to be the fastest mode of transportation on a ship. And now we've harnessed electricity, lightning. We have lightning in our phones, in our pockets. This is crazy. And yet, with all that we have mastered, all that we have tamed, we still haven't tamed the human tongue. Because in order to do that, you have to be able to change your own heart. That's not something that we can do. It takes something bigger than us and outside of us. So another human can't change your heart. It has to be the one who created you. That can only be God. So the only way that you are going to be able to have a changed heart that will lead to changed words is by surrendering to Jesus. Save that for when we get over there and we'll talk about it. I would love to hear it. That's pretty much how I'm going to close it for you guys. Is I want you guys to give yourselves a real solid look in the mirror, right? Go look, engage yourself. Look at, okay, how am I treating the people around me? And spoiler alert, the way you're going to tell how you treat people is not going to be how you treat a stranger. It's how you treat the people you care about the most. How do you treat your parents? Do you respect your parents? Do you talk back to your parents? Or do you do what they ask the first time with excellence? How do you treat your brothers and sisters, the other members of your family? How do you treat classmates and friends, teachers? How do you treat people in your church family? How are you treating the people you care about the most on a day-to-day basis? The people who get under your skin the most often. There's no one who knows how to push my buttons better than my sisters, I'll tell you that much. How do I treat my sisters? And it's not how do you treat them on a good day, it's how do you treat them on a bad day. I want you to give yourself a good look in the mirror, ask yourself those questions, reflect on that, and then say, okay, when I am squeezed around these people, does Jesus come out of me or does sin come out of me? Am I committing myself to a relationship with Jesus or am I content with living the way that I am in sin?